This model is entitled Spanish Translation Topics and Translation from the Conquest to the Spanish Colony. I am sure we are going to have an enjoyable morning with this topic, and we are going to learn a lot. So make sure that your equipments are in silent, muted, so that the recording will be smooth. And also register your attendance, because that's important for this diplomado. And remember to go in classroom to be updated on the last information or task that we are assigned to. So with no delay, because we already know our speaker, with no delay, we'll call on Dr. Rafael Cardenas, who will be in charge for the whole week again. Professor Rafael.
Good morning, everybody. Morning. So, well, it's my pleasure once more to be here with you. And well, before we get started with our material that is designed according to our plan for the week, I first of all wish you had a very nice break. It's important also to take away some time in order to do other things. Uh, well, in the meantime, I had been going over your assessment, the summative one, mainly the paper, the reaction paper that we had pending. Pretty soon, I'm going to be also requesting from you another paper. So make sure you don't have two papers together, because that probably could be a bit overwhelming. As you know, the demands have to be mounting. This is what we do in didactics, right? If we start with 300 words, then we're going to probably move on to 500 to 600 and so forth. So there will be a lot more to produce. I'm sure you're having plenty material to go over. Now, my promise to you is this week to post in Classroom our a summary of the material that I'm developing here with you in our in-session classes. Um, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to split the content, right? I'm going to separate what is historical content regarding translation. That's going to be one PowerPoint, and the other one is going to be mainly information regarding cognates and proverbs and sayings. And the reason for this is because these are the largely unknown areas in translation, mainly English, Spanish, Spanish, English pair. We do not have much background in historical translation because this course doesn't exist. We don't have a course in historical translation or the history of translation. And this is important because, look, I remember when I was a student at the English department, we used to have in last year a history of the English language, and that was part A and part B. As time went on, these courses were replaced by others. This is normal because, you know, what is normal is change, and we need to evolve with the times. However, the curriculum has suffered because of this limited, you know, scope on in terms of linguistics. I remember in history of the English language, we had lots of morphology, lots of information regarding lexicology also, inflections, things that we started doing in general linguistics 300 when we were third year students were transferred to fourth year in the history of the English language. That was a very, very useful course. And well, the same happens with translation. Now that it has become a field, well-established field, it's necessary for us to acquire, you know, better repertoires in terms of the theories behind the procedures, how we do things and why we do so. This is so useful. So yes, this is going to be one PowerPoint that I'm going to be posting over there. The other one is going to be on the cognates, as I was saying, the proverbs and the sayings, and this other information, which is more cultural than anything. The thing with culture is that culture is generally very, very difficult to translate. There is no way for a simply bilingual translator to deal with all of that information. There is no way you can deal with all of that without at least a brush up of some of that culture. We need the culture also, the cultural element. Otherwise, what we're going to be discussing and explaining and transferring or rendering in translation or interpretation is going to be incomplete or poorly presented. And this is not the idea. The idea is that we, as professionals, do our very best every time. So that's the challenge. You know, as usual, this is our challenge to look good and live up to the expectation. This is what we are supposed to do. So here we go once more with all of this, you know. Well, before I get started with material today, I need to do a little bit of housekeeping with you. Today, Monday, first day of our third week now. And the reason for this is because honestly, there's certain things that I think are worth checking out, you know. So let me just get to the information I want to share with you, and I'm going to be projecting it immediately. Let me see. Bear with me a second, please. All righty. I just got it. Is it visible? Hold on. It should be showing. Wow, a lot of dark. Okay. Let me just see if this is now okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Very good. Now, I have some material entitled over there. Let me just confirm the title. Title is Additional Resources for Translation Work. That's the very first thing I want to talk about. This is not optional. These are 6 books that I'm posting over there for you, and I'm going to read through the description so that we all know what it is that you're being offered right here. So you will read inside that this is a major addition to the program curriculum. So that I posted on the 9th, on March the 9th. Okay, here you will find added materials for downloading and further reading. So you're expected to download them all and read them all if you may. The first one is a translation dictionary, a good resource for any translator at all times. Dictionaries which offer traditional one-on-one meaning correspondences do not help. So this one focuses on the phrase level analysis, a much better option. Now, a translation dictionary is chunk by chunk. It's language chunks, you know, pieces of language. They go over the word level, one-on-one correspondence or equivalence. It goes more to the phrase level. It's very useful, though it's not as easy as a traditional dictionary because you won't necessarily always find what you're looking for because words are, you know, clustered, you know, put together. So you have to be careful in your search over there. But this is a good thing to start looking at. For example, at the English department for my classes, I sometimes use a dictionary, which is the well-spoken thesaurus. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And this one works this way. It's also phrases by phrases because this is for writing enrichment and refinement. Here is more for translation. And as you know, since we go for the ideas, you'll have to find a phrase that can help you communicate your intention, right? So it's a very good one. So it's a Merriam-Webster English Spanish translation dictionary. So it's a dictionary for translation work. I don't have anything planned for it. However, I think you should start familiarizing yourselves with this format if you haven't yet, right? We also have another one entitled English Complex Exercises. Okay, as I typed here before, it's a textbook. It's a textbook for improving terminology knowledge, using word elements such as prefixes, suffixes, and word roots, and word combining also. This is a good book to learn your ropes with lexical elements of translation. It's a very good resource. If you ever decide that you want to go into a little bit of analysis of etymology, the semantic component of words, semantic mapping that we discussed before also, it's also generally, supported by this kind of material, right? So you scaffold a lot of what you do with words and word analysis and the breaking down words into components, the particles, the inflections, the declensions, and the existence of attachments to the root word, the combining of the words together. All of that works very well with a material like this. It's a very, I think, interesting one that also supports translation work, because a lot of what we do in translation concerns word analysis. So you'll find a lot of work here. There's another one I posted for you guys. Is a book named Catálogo de Expresiones para la Traducción Inversa. This concerns back translation, as you know, which is also another topic that we're dealing with from Vázquez Ayora's a chapter 1 analysis that is available and open for you guys to work on. Along with some of the work that we have announced here, I'm expecting Vázquez Ayora's analysis and the creation of parallel structures as they are in Unit 1. I'm expecting that one. There is no deadline for this one, but I'm expecting that one. Concerning the other work that you've been working on, that is what we call formative, formative, 100% formative. So you may or may not send it, but Vázquez Ayora's analysis in the 2 paragraphs that I posted, yes, you just proceed and do so. Send me that, because I'm going to show you what I have received so far. I'm going to share everything here with you. The good thing is, classroom is pretty impersonal, so we don't have anybody on the spot, but this is going to be an important call. Okay. The best, one of the very best ones I have is translation strategies, right? Translation strategies. This is great. I'm going to be using this one during this week. This very same week, we're going to work on this material. So this is a training manual for translation schools. It's an international material. Very, very good. This is Brinton, Ortiz, and Cruz. I think, yes, that's what it is. You have all kinds of texts over there. There are 3 major categories over there: short texts, longer texts, and literary texts, which are, of course, what a translator is going to run into most of the times. Chances are they're going to give you a book, generally long text. If not, you're going to be receiving something shorter, maybe transcripts, maybe a letter. There could be some communication, maybe a minor report, something. All of that's a shorter text. Literary translation is also possible if you're going to embark yourself in a project, such as translating a novel, maybe a book, or maybe some poetry. That kind of thing's challenging, really, really. And this is an excellent book that is going to train you in this work. I am using this one this very same week. I'm going to start, and on our final week after our longer recess, I'm going to carry on working with this material. So if you're going to download and print something, this is the one I strongly recommend you to go ahead and do so. Now, some of these books are classic. Okay, by that I mean they're not brand new books, 2020s, but they're still in use largely in everybody's bibliographies. because of their usefulness, essentially. Now, going back to translation strategy, sorry, to Catálogo de Expresiones, you have 7,000 words over there. This is very good, very, very good, especially for interpretation. If you ever have to interpret, you're going to find phrase equivalences right there for you, right there. Okay, you don't have to uh, think so much about them. Concerning historical information, I decided to add one of the good ones that I have read, translation in Spanish Empire. This is Spanish Empire, the conquest and the colony, part of what we're going to be discussing also during this week, right? Um, it's a good author. It's authored by Baldeón. This is a Spanish author who's well known in translation. And well, he explains the history of Spanish English Spanish translation to some extent, because if we understand where Spanish comes from, or the long way Spanish has gone through to our days, we'll get a better understanding of how we the dynamics of interaction with other languages, other major languages, including English. Of course, I need to include something on technology. Unfortunately, as I post here in my explanation or description, this resource is just mainly theoretical. Why? Why so? Because translation technology is an expensive topic. End of the story. And for us to go into CAT tools, of course, I would never use anything commercial, because that's not the idea. We're not here to be in anybody's market. And this is not because I say so. It's this way in the world. At present, we have a free and open movement, which is very dynamic in the world. And for every one of those major platforms or softwares used commercially, either SDL Traders, probably you've heard the name. I don't know. Maybe you've heard the name SDL Traders, or I don't know. Well, there's so many other equivalents, right? For types of softwares or applications or platforms that would replace them. For instance, in the translation programs we've used here, I think MQ is one of those. Quite a few others, but they're replacements for all of those major commercial names. So, and that would have to be, of course, an entirely seminar by itself, because there is so much to talk about them. Now, what this book can do, I'm referring to Peng and Huang's New Advances in Translation Technology, is for you to get an overview of what is out there. Okay, what is out there? What are the trends of translation assisted by technology? The so-called CAT tools, computer assisted translation tools, that are now being impacted by AI. AI is transforming right now what translation work meant in the past 10 to 15 years, before the advent of all these other resources. So still, even so, we don't have any replacement for the translator insight, really, because translation work could be assisted regarding some things, some important things, but the most necessary, such as background information through historical means, or probably information concerning the culture and folklore, there is no way, I think, technology is going to help you out solve that kind of problem. So we still very much need human beings. Okay, I'm going to refer very quickly here to translation strategies. I hope this is opening. Let me know if it is not.
Yes, it's open.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, of course, since you're here for this seminar, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, it's taking me to another one. Okay, I'm gonna try to just go into the table of contents. Okay, here we go. Wow, it's rushing things really fast. Okay, here's the book. It's Translation Strategies. As I was saying, Estrategias para Traducción, Brinton, Cruz, Ortiz, and White. Okay, it's very good, really. Very, very good. Not because I say so. If you get to it, you will find out that it is a very good book for you to print it. I would recommend you for you to print it. Now, one of the things that tells us that a book is really good is because you see that the book has been republished or reprinted several times. You see that it was first published in 1981. However, it's been reappearing for several years, for over a decade. Okay, so what this tells you is that it's established in the market. Okay, maybe it's not used so much in this part of the world. As you see, it was printed in Hong Kong, but I think it's an international book. It's a very, very good one. Okay, let me go to this table of contents. Let me take over control of this thing because it's rushing up and down. Okay, okay. In this material, we have a, oh man, okay, here we have a section that has to do with shorter passages for translation, right? Man, it's rushing so fast. Oh, it's very hard to control here. Hold on. Okay. We also have longer passages for translation, literary translation, a fourth section on technical translation, and some appendixes on grammar and other materials. For the sake and scope and sequence of this curriculum to be developed during this certificate program, I'll be dealing with the main three parts of this material: short passages for translation, longer passages, and literary translation. Um, I'm gonna, provide you a head start. The coming assessment that you will do will come from this material as well. Okay, will come from this material as well. So I strongly recommend you to start familiarizing yourselves with this material. Now, I'd like to ask you, have you used this book? Estrategias de Traducción. This is by Brinton, White, Cruz, and Ortiz. Have you used it?
I
Does
haven't.
it does it ring a bell to anybody?
No, Professor.
No, really. Okay, then this is something new for you, even though it's not any new really. It's not any new. As you see, I'm showing you the first printing, 1981, but it's being used internationally. I can tell you for sure. It's a very good one. So pretty soon I'm going to start discussing this material with you. So start familiarizing yourselves so that we can enjoy this material very much because it's very, very useful. It concentrates everything we care about, really. Okay, let me just make sure I. Mhm. Okay, let me see if I may stop this sharing. Hold on. All righty. Okay, I am back. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about is that you should be sending me something important. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I may get to that one. Well, Okay, what I wanted to remind you, I don't want to, overextend myself here, is that make sure you complete your work concerning the segmentation of the 2 paragraphs that I left you with. Make sure you send that to me. All right. You can send that, you can forward that to my mail. Okay. I already posted my mail in Classroom. So you have free decision making concerning how you will handle that one. But given that I have to provide you with a grade, it's a good idea that you do that one, because all that is counting, okay? And I need to make sure we have grades to justify everything. So make sure you send me that during the week, please. I'm talking about the 2 paragraphs that you have to segment. It's just the segmenting and then the putting together in parallel structures according to Vasquez Ayura's treatment of text. It's very necessary and I need it. I'm giving you the time necessary, I think. So in case you couldn't catch up during the week, make sure you catch up during this week, not last week, but this week now. Don't let it go away without you taking care of that one. So it's very important that you uh, go over that. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I continue, reminding you about it. Not because I want to be, annoying, but the reason is justified. Okay. Is this format okay? I'd like to know if you can see the slide well, because I'm trying to use something a little bit different. I don't know if this is visible. Is this visible to you? Everything, the screen?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah,
But the
because
other one was better, in my
oh,
opinion.
okay. All
Just
right.
because it's bigger, the other way is no, it's bigger the material, the content of it's bigger to see, it's bigger to understand. That's fine.
Okay. So content only then. Okay, here we go. Better, right?
Yes, thank you.
All righty, very good. Okay, so here we go. We're moving along our continuum. Now we're starting module three, okay? So, now we need to talk about a little bit of historical information. This historical information we'll be talking about has to do with what happened in the 19th century. So after the European conquest of the Americas, so the colonies started. So colonies started around Romanticism period, which is, as you know, the Victorian, so to speak, period. Here it was known as Romanticism, essentially. Over there was more Victorian in Europe, so especially in Latin America. So what defined this period of time was that rigid laws of neoclassicism were kind of rejected, and there was more freedom of spirit. So it was important for people to, be empowered, to be free. Let us remember that most of the tenets of present day democracy started around this period. And all those values that came from the French Revolution and some other revolutions that took place were aimed at freeing the people, freeing their spirits and their minds. What happens is that Romanticism treated translators in contradictory manners. Okay, we were talking before that in England during Dryden's period, you remember Dryden, the translator acquired some prestige, but that was only in that part of Europe. Okay, elsewhere it was not viewed as so important, right? One way this anti-neoclassicistic period of Romanticism, one way they treated translators unfairly uh, was only to favor the original languages. Okay, and translators started being relegated as non-creative, simply some editors or copiers of others people work. Okay, and what this caused is that people did not see translation as serious. Okay, so it was like a second tier, second class production. So this is what happened during the period. The other treatment of translators was, to treat them like fellow romantics, and allow them the freedom to feel and create. Now, ideally, this treatment of a translator um, granted them some respect, and kept them in touch with the feelings of the writers and all this. But still, translators were disregarded in many aspects. Okay, as you should expect, the Romantics were very much concerned with the translation of poetry. Okay? Why? Because poetry is extreme. It's creativity at the extreme. It's an extreme form of creativity, literary creativity, and a great deal of the attention paid to translation in this period dealt with the issue of whether or not poetry could be translated or at all. Some people thought it was not possible for anybody to translate poetry. It's very hard. So we see here some remarks by some authors of the time. The poet Percy Bysshe was against, of course, this fact, the translation of poetry, because he explained that it was, there was this like original seed, right, of thought in the poet's mind that could not be transferred. And you see here this quotation extracted from this important author is that it was wise to cast a violet into a crucible that you might discover the formal principle of its color and odor, as to seek to transfuse from one language to another the creations of a poet. The plant must spring against from its seed, or it will bear no flower. And this is the burthen of the curse of Babel. So what he essentially explains here is that there is this loss of information and loss of beauty, and the artistic part of translation. You see, now we are here dealing with one extreme of the translation process. As you know, is science and art. Well, the artistic component was probably sacrificed for the sake of a message, and they knew that this was like a curse, because people could not communicate themselves openly in other languages. Well, some of these poetry translators from the Romantic period performed, some very good work. Here we have Matthew Arnold. It's an important name in poetry and production during the Romantic period. He argues that the purpose of translation should be to achieve the same effect on the reader that the original would have on those who would read it in the language of the writer. Of course, this is the ultimate goal of a good translation, to equal the original. But this is a tall order also. It's very challenging, right? So he explained that accuracy must be sacrificed for the aesthetic and emotional effect anyway. So this is the same concern that the prior author explained. You see, usually this artistic part of poetry suffers. The Romantic poet who best illustrates this principle was Edward Fitzgerald, whose translation from Persian of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam carries deep impact in the English language, right? So there had been production during this period. It's also important, we're talking here 19th century. In the United States, we could say, given it has always had this important international projection, they started creating a translation and interpretation department in the Department of Foreign Affairs, attached to Department of State Department. So they probably created the very first diplomatic or diplomacy and trade office in the world. And I think everything else that we did in Western culture was modeled after what they started doing, because they started doing it very early in the century. So you see, in 1781, they started this Department of Foreign Affairs very, very early. And well, they began with a French interpreter and French translator. The reason is simple. French was the language of prestige and diplomacy at the time. This was a different era. The next language that was added immediately was Spanish, but that wasn't so immediately because it happened 5 years later. A few years later, as you see here, my sources informed that the staff was expanded to 10. Okay, probably was not that adequate, but there was lots of work to be contracted out to other translators, because so much work, in diplomacy is generally produced and it's generated. So this is just to provide some antecedents, right? Some antecedents to this material. Very good. Okay, we're going to deal here with a little bit of lexical problems and some semantic mapping, okay, how that can help us connect things. You see how we can deal with word level terminology problems. Okay, so a translator frequently has problems with words which seem to be equivalent, right, from the source to the target language. The range of possible meaning is different from one language to another. You see here, this example I'm providing here, that you have words such as novia that could, mean different things. That could be bride, that could be girlfriend, that could be partner, that could be different things, right? But there is only one meaning only in English. That people generally go for, which is girlfriend. This is for practical matters. People go for that, meaning, but that doesn't necessarily mean only that. You see, you also have fiancé and so forth. So, so for a novice translator, this is tricky. The reason is because a bilingual dictionary is going to give you one-on-one correspondences, right? List of word equivalences, maybe. If you deal with a bilingual one, that's what you're going to find. And it's not going to define ranges of meaning. It will not tell you about overlapping unless it's a very modern dictionary of the sort that is based on a corpus. So corpora, corpora oriented or based corpus dictionaries. But not even those work, because languages are constantly evolving. So theory has caused all of these other dictionaries based on corpora not to last so long, because studies keep on moving in terms of what people say and what people don't say. So compensating for this efficiency is hard. What people traditionally did is that they consulted single language dictionaries for the range of meaning, right? To get all of the possible definitions of a word. And someone who especially, focus on the quality of that translation will understand that there is a connotation and there is a denotation, right? So in terms of connotation, we'll probably go into the history of the word, the analysis of the components, and expand further into technical dictionaries, probably to find some of the history of word usage and place it in specific contexts. Generally, translators won't have the time to do this, right? And this is historical. You're expected to translate for yesterday, always. So, this creates mistakes. And that is why we said during week 1 and 2 that translators learn more from their mistakes than from theory. So where will the actual problems begin? Well, we're going to trip over all kinds of false cognates and have lexical mismatches, right? Eh, that's because, it's so hard to find the right definition if you don't have more information concerning context. Okay. This developed because words evolve differently in each language, right? Eh, and Similarity is a coincidence. There is no linkage at all. So that is why you see that I keep showing you here cognates. So reason because they're necessary. They are a subject of study all by themselves, and we need to learn to deal with a false cognate, partial cognate, partial false cognates. Right? We need to deal with this. False cognates are the bane of the translator, so to speak. And one of the quickest ways to test the translation competency of an individual it, is to subject him or her to a text that is loaded with the traps of false cognates. So this is a way for a person to know if you really know the languages or not, if you're competent enough to deal with this project. Here we have one example. You have actual as current, actual as exacto real. This is one of the common cognates, right? This is what in general terms will eventually relate to Anglicisms and Hispanicisms that we'll be talking about later during the week. Now, what about semantic mapping? So to avoid the problem, this device was, borrowed from general linguistics, right? From linguistics theory. Semantic mapping is a strategy, right? As it suggests, it means drawing a diagram of the range of meaning of one or more words in ways that will help us, the trap of, not knowing which one to go for, right? So we won't go for the denotative meaning and pay more attention to the possible connotative meanings or other possible definitions. So the simplest form of semantic mapping is within one language, right? So as to see how a word can include other meanings within its meaning, it's intralingual. And you see here that if you say Evita is a dog, right? And it is a beagle. It's a beagle, and it's also a dog, but in general words, it's a canine. All right. So it's also a mammal. We can say other things. We may have outer and outer layers beyond canine, but the reality is that this is an analysis that is required whenever we're dealing with something technical. Here we're providing a very simple word just for illustrative purposes. But if you need to do this with something like transformer, okay, there you have a challenge because you need to be able to know what a transformer is, okay? And transformer also has the name of a fictional movie, but it is also a piece of equipment of very technical type, okay? So as to explain all of this, it's important to visit the different layers of meaning that the word already has. So it's challenging in this regard, but this is part of the analysis required every time we're dealing with words. And here we have the correspondences. And another way is to overlap, a little bit of meanings because of polysemy, right? Polysemy is a phenomenon in which we have a word that has different definitions or different meanings or different possible uses. In this case, of novia, girlfriend being fiancé or bride or romantic partner or sexual partner, it has different definitions to it. We also have over here others, such as in the case of nail, you have there, it could be fingernail, That could also be the nail, metal nail that you'll nail in wood or in some concrete or whatever material you're trying to fasten something or put things together. Here we go with cognates. We have partial semantic overlap. It's a real phenomenon. It's a real phenomenon. It doesn't mean that you're completely wrong, but you're not completely right. However, information gets lost in translation if you don't use the right word. So you have to aim at the right term every time. So is this challenging? Very, very challenging, because this is what we call shifting sands, right? You are like on shifting sand. You're standing there, but you're not fully in control all the time because so many things are not very clear. Sometimes we have to analyze things this way, juxtaposing meanings, right? It's a fancy word to juxtapose, but that's what you do. So, for example, if you don't have a very clear term, like, for example, the idea of joining, you could have a coalition, alliance, you could have a league, you could have a union, and each one of these possible words for the idea of joining will provide your sentence or your statement a different flavor, okay, different flavors in meaning. Just to put it in some clear, language. So since you're going to have all this variety, it's important to familiarize yourselves with it. Now, AI has come to our assistance, in a great way. A lot of paraphrasing could be done through ChatGPT or DeepSeek or any of those AI assistant forms. You may very easily go ahead and ask these intelligences, okay, how could I paraphrase this to make it more academic, to make it more formal, to make it more colloquial, and so forth. So these options are also possible through this intelligent repository of language forms that will tap into style and register. But the idea is that you, as a competent translator, won't have to rely so much on those AIs unless you really get stuck, right? So it's also possible to do diagramming like this, opposing meanings, right? So the hot, cold, and tall and short, night and day, and all this. This is also important information that can help you out connect words or find some relationship between words. So I'm going to go back a little bit and ask you a question. How do you do, or how do you manage translation in which you have words that have multiple meanings? What do you do? What do you normally do? Or if you have translated before, what did you do in order to help yourself discover what to do with a word that has multiple meanings?
Professor, context, I think it's essential. Try to understand who is going to be the reader, what is the context of the material I have in front of me, and in order to decide which
Very good.
is
Thank you. Great.
Yes.
Exactly. You are on the right track. Exactly. This is what it's generally recommended, that we read what is before, what comes before, what comes after. Sometimes the writing could be very technical. We don't want to scare ourselves here with anything technical of that sort. But you could have something on, for example, geology or hydrology. And well, to a translator, this is largely unknown because it's very technical engineering field or fields. So what to do? Exactly. You have to look at what comes before, what comes after, and try to, through that, find a solution, because sometimes you just don't have the word or you don't have the understanding or what you're dealing with. The best example is this, the idea of joining, okay? I want to write, for example, the United States form a coalition of countries to counter the closing of the Hormuz Strait, okay? The coalition. Now, if you say that, what you imply is that there was an agreement and an understanding, and everybody is going to be supporting the U.S. in a war. They are all going to fight. The banner men are going to fight, or the banner countries are going to fight aside the U.S. to preserve the global economy in balance, right? Through the Strait of Hormuz, whatever the situation that is. Okay, but if you say the United States form an alliance to counter the closing of the Hormuz Strait. Now, an alliance is not the same as a coalition. Coalition is a lot more tighter than an alliance. An alliance is maybe some people in favor, but they don't necessarily will go fight any problem happening. So there is a chain of meaning over there that is in the sentence. So an alliance is a weaker form of joining than a coalition is stronger. They're extremes, you see. Same happens with union and league. You could say, well, the teachers' union accomplished a major victory by forcing the government to repay after their firing. Okay, just to put it, as a simple sentence. Well, a union, that's a teachers' union, or the union, that's a very well structured organization that has, that has a general secretary and treasurer secretary and so forth. It's a structure. But you then say a league of teachers took the case to the Supreme Court, took the case of their dismissal to Supreme Court. So the teachers' league, or a league, that's a weaker form. It's not something formal. It doesn't necessarily has a backbone structure like, people with positions of authority and responsibility. So it's more like simply some agreement on it. I don't know if you see it with me. I don't know if we see eye to eye with this. If you have something to say concerning this, let me know, please. All right. I'm moving along. And now we have to start talking about some problems, some problems that occur all the time. And these are also related to words, and because words are units, but they're not the main unit in translation. However, they keep carrying lots of meaning. So because of its Latin roots, the verb structure of Spanish is quite different from English. Okay? The student of intermediate and advanced Spanish learns many of these differences, and even elementary students struggle with the basic complications, such as look at ser, estar, Some of the verbs, the verb problems, which the advanced students of Spanish should be familiar include. For English Spanish, you have preterite and imperfect past, subjunctive, of its different kinds, Main verbs are not reflective, that are not reflexive in English, are reflexive in Spanish. Okay. So you say lavarse, caerse, levantarse, afeitarse. Well, but that doesn't exist in English, like shave me, or get me up, or get myself up. You have to resort to some other structure. Concerning English modal auxiliaries, the use of will, shall, will, would, can, could, so forth. This also complicates things, because what you have in Spanish, it's a long rosary of conjugations that need to be mastered, learned, and handled. Now we're going to be discussing verb forms that creates translator headaches, right? And the use is probably not correct. Their appearance is odd or foreign if used occasionally. So what I mean by that is that you could be inadequate, not necessarily wrong, as you go along with this. Listen to this. You could be inadequate, not necessarily wrong. Okay, so don't be so harsh in your judgment of what is a bad or poor translation, because here is a inadequacy. What it needs is probably further improvement, right? For quality purposes, of course. The first and most common problem is passive voice. Okay. Okay. It is very frequent in English, but not in Spanish. Okay. You need to remember that. So you're okay with passivization in English, not as okay in Spanish because Spanish is differently framed. So as a result, translators should question any of the uses of the passive in Spanish, see if it's justified, because that's like taking things out of the ordinary. That's where you are stepping into inadequacy. And then perhaps test the result with a native speaker, right? That's what's generally recommended. So let's take a look at some cases here. Passive voice is legitimately used in Spanish when the agent of the verb's action is specified or very strongly implied. Okay, so it's justified in these instances when the verb action is specified or strongly implied. Okay. El auto fue robado por Juan. Okay. Okay, that's a possible translation. The car was stolen today, but you omit by the thief. El auto fue robado hoy por el ladrón. That's omitting also the agent here. Now, in other cases, where the agent of the action, the verb's action is not expressed or expressed or stressed, Spanish more naturally we use direct active voices preferred, for the construction. Pintaron la casa el año pasado. Se pintó la casa el año pasado. This is the best possible option here. Okay, and then you can see it down there in yellow. Por no está permitido comer en la biblioteca. That's unnatural. A little better. No se permite comer en la biblioteca. That's inadequate. Now, the best. Se prohíbe comer en la biblioteca. This is more natural. Okay, so this is the best one. Okay, in terms of using passive voice in Spanish. Okay.
Professor, I also have a question concerning the passive voice. Because also it's a little bit tricky because in Spanish we use passive voice like much more in a much more formal situations. But naturally in Spanish it's not like a common way of expressing ourselves. And in English, you use more passive voice for like academic purposes or when you have to really, okay. That will depend on the way we translate. When we have passive voice, we have to take that into account. Or it's just a matter of understanding the context.
What translation theory, suggests, or what sources suggest, is that we should aim at the most natural version and use passive voice the least in Spanish because active voice is preferred. Linguistically speaking, Spanish is seems to be more successful. It's like it's a successful language for you to communicate in this active voice. If you go for passive, then you start not communicate, you lose meaning and you don't communicate the idea as clearly. However, in English it's not the case because it's the moving of the parts. Morphologically speaking, it's better. You preserve chunks. But in Spanish, what you do is that you use conjugations, and the conjugations will get you off track. So if you're going to really use passive voice, the best way is probably the simplest way. Se prohíbe. None of those conjugations, no se permite o no está permitido. All of those are weaker forms. It's leaving out or omitting the subject of a sentence and using the se and infinitive form. This is what is suggested generally, because that doesn't alter so much the transference from active to passive. That's what occurs. That we should aim for the most natural one of all the options. Not that we have others. We do have others, but those are highly inadequate and not natural by that, but that's what I mean. Moving further, the second problem with is the English present participle, gerunds like ing and ando in Spanish, those endings. So as with the passive, English tends to use it more often. You see, and the translator should ask same question about whether the gerund is permissible or advisable in Spanish. You have to, sit down and reflect a little bit. So English tends to use it in more progressive tenses, much more frequently than Spanish. Spanish avoids using it when we de-emphasize how long the action will take. So look at this. What are you eating? Possible. ¿Qué estás comiendo? Ver, ¿qué comes? So it's important to take note. For Spanish, it's important not to use much of passive voice. For Spanish, it's not very good idea for us to include gerunds. It's better to go for more stable verb forms. ¿Qué comes? You see below, English frequently has or uses the gerund as an adjective. Okay, Spanish cannot. So take a look. Decision making, toma de decisiones. Okay. Interesting idea. Idea interesante. Okay. So you see the making. That's of course decision making. It's a gerund. It takes the form of a noun. A gerund stands for noun. Toma de decisiones becomes a phrase altogether. All right. There is no correspondence. You don't say anything like tomando decisiones. That's not natural. That's not proper. Or it's not equivalent. Interesting idea. Idea interesante. In the place of Spanish infinitives, look at this. Le gusta comer. He likes eating. Amar is vivir, loving is living. So it's better to go for stable forms which are not conjugated when you're providing translations into Spanish or from Spanish to English. It's okay to use the gerund. It's okay to use the passive voice. It's okay every time you go into English. But coming from English to Spanish, it's a bad idea to use ando, endo gerunds. It's a bad idea to use passive voice, right? So those are big no-nos. There is also another important issue here, something called the dramatic present. So when the present is used to describe an action in the past to give a more dramatic impact, it's used often in Spanish, but very little in English. So you read here, for example. So this is the dramatic present. San Martín nace en Yapeyú, pero muy joven se traslada a España para iniciarse en la carrera militar, right? So this is the dramatic present. We know that this happened before, right? So that doesn't make any sense, like for us to write that San Martin is born in Yapeyú, but at an early age he moves to Spain to start his military career. That's no, that's like confusing. Much natural sounding English translation would be to use the tense, right? Proper tense. San Martin was born, etc., and he moved to Spain. So it's not that the dramatic present is impossible to use and people will not understand when you say something like San Martin is born, blah, blah. Yes, they will understand you, but that's inadequate. That's inadequate. Okay. And much better would be to use the tense, the past tense. So, okay, recapping a little bit. I'm going to recap a bit here. We need to be careful with passive voice. It's okay to translate and use passive voice in English because it's very common. Same happens with gerunds. Gerunds are common in English. We should be using gerunds. However, in Spanish, we have to avoid using so much passive voice. And if we're going for passive voice, we have to go for the se. Se pintó el salón. Se dispuso una medida. Just to give an example, you know, something out of the blue. That's the preferred form if we have to use it, because it's generally not advisable to use passive voice so much in Spanish. Same as gerunds. Whenever we see ing forms, it's not a good thing for you to use ando endo. You better say something stable. For example, drinking and driving is a bad idea. You know, beber y conducir es mala idea. You know, it has to go for much more stable form. Now the dramatic form also, it's an important element to bring into account as well. Dramatic present. Okay, it's a way to tell a story, but then we have to resort to the proper tenses whenever we're going from Spanish to English. I don't know if you have any comments concerning passive voice, use of gerunds, and the dramatic present. Or comment or question.
Professor, I think that is also very, very important also to have a little bit more information about the use about Spanish grammar. This would be also very interesting, like to review a little bit. But it's true. I haven't. I have read before about this dramatic presence, but because you know Spanish because it's your native language. But now that you're explaining this dramatic present, I didn't have any idea about. And it's true. In for example, novels and history books, it's very common to use in that way. Nace en, pero muy, o sea, it's just something that it's very much common in Spanish. And you're used to that because it is just your native language. But now that we are analyzing, it's very interesting to see the differences.
You're
English
right.
is in English it's a little bit weird if you use like it's more, it's like a kind of poetic, something like that.
Yes, this is so true. And well, I think the only book I have added here that has all of that Spanish grammar is Vasquez Ayora's book. If you check out the different chapters, because that has quite a few of those, you will start, getting deeper into Spanish grammar and the morphology. I think this is one of the best books on the subject. As I was telling you, this was reprinted, and and the reason is because not so many people write about these topics from the translator's perspective. Like, because this is, as I was telling you, this is something called comparative linguistics, and it's a subfield. It's a subfield because It's like you're a specialist if you get into comparative linguistics of English and Spanish. It's like very narrow focused. Okay, I'm moving on to some cognates then. Okay, so it's always a good thing to go back to the topic. So I'd like to ask you, why do we keep on discussing cognates? Why do we do that? Well, the reason is simple. Cognates, same as proverbs and sayings, they are difficult to translate. Not because we have something special to know about them. The problem is that they are extremely cultural connected or, context dependent. And there is no way for a translator sometimes to know what to do with them. And we were talking here just a very short time ago about what happens with semantic mapping. You have one word having multiple meanings. This is polysemy, right? And then what do? How do we know which one to deal with? It's so hard. So every time we're talking here about false cognate, partial cognate, and partial false cognate, what we are dealing with is words with multiple definitions. And we just don't always hit the target. You see, we'll go, looking for the best option. Sometimes there isn't a best option. Sometimes there isn't. So that is why a translator is a lexicographer himself, because you will start developing your glossaries, and eventually those could become dictionaries. So someone who lives on translation or makes a living out of translation should generate glossaries and dictionaries. Why? Because this is what you do. You're dealing with words with multiple definitions, and you're dealing with connotative and denotative aspects of meaning, layers of meaning, shades of meaning within the same word. So here we go. Intoxicado is a partial false cognate. Intoxicated generally, but usually means a medical physical reaction to poison or bad food poisoning, right? So for intoxicated in the alcohol of drug sense, instead, there must be other options such as ebrio, borracho, drogado, but not intoxicado, because you have a loss of meaning over there. And if you're writing this in a medical report, people will understand probably the person took the wrong medication by accident and not that he smoked pots or something like that, or drank a bottle of whiskey. Introducir, that's a false cognate. To present or insert an idea or object, right? So it's not the same as to present a person to another person's presentar, right? Te presento a José. Te presento a José. No te introduzco, te introducí a José. Come on, that doesn't make any sense. And we can very easily run into these kind of things. Invertir is a partial false cognate. To turn upside down, right? Also, to invest money or capital. This is a partial one because you could be using this word in different ways. Jornada is a false cognate. That doesn't mean journey. Instead, it's a viaje. But jornada could be days workshop, seminar, workshop like we're doing here today and during this week. Labor is a partial false cognate. Here you find that it has a broader meaning than the English labor. Labor is more like mano de obra, right? Shell means manual physical factory work. Spanish labor can also mean mental or intellectual work. In terminology of economics and government, English labor is translated as trabajo. The labor ministry is Ministerio de Trabajo. Lectura, false cognate, for equals reading across the field. Not as much as in lecture. Lecture is conferencia, ponencia. That's different, right? You have local, it's a partial false cognate that equals or equivalents to or equals to local, local in the sense of being close by, local in the sense of being close by. If physical, geographically, or physically, also as a store premise, or store, maybe a venue, location, el local 12, right? Del mismo edificio, it's a premise, store premise, a physical location of a store. Then localizar is a partial false cognate, right? It equals to make local, to make something local. But it's different, like to locate, from locate, find, situar, ubicar, that's a different story. Going back to some proverbs and idioms, because we need to keep on going with this. Estaba fuera de sí, eh? Not to be mad or upset, because that'll be lost his mind over, or person went out of control. That's something else. But fuera de sí, as into faint, that's more out of sorts, right? Or blanked, or was unconscious. Fuerte como un roble to mean someone's very strong, or strong as an ox, right? Always the ox comes in, that animal. Fulano de tal, so a John Doe. Función corrida, that's like, ongoing, right? All day program, repeated showings of a movie. So all day. Okay. It's like, also for using in many other cases, right? All day or repeated. Ganarse la vida, to earn a living, to make a living. Hacer alarde, to brag, boast. Hacer escala en, to make a stop at, right? In the transit. Hacer hincapié en, to emphasize, insist on. Hacerse la vista gorda, to wink at, to pretend not to see, to overlook, probably, intentionally, to overlook intentionally, wink at, accept, or pretend not to see. Okay. As I was telling you before, what I'm going to do is, for example, take these sections on the cognates that I am including in this presentation, and I'm going to create a single one based on all of them. Of course, if I'm going to do that, it's because I want you to do something with it too. What I would recommend you is to do some worksheet, develop some worksheet that I'm going to post over there, also accompanying the PowerPoint. My intention is that you get the chance to write your sentences using some of these cognates. Of course, there's so many. You don't have to write so many sentences, but I strongly recommend you to do so as a way for you to, at least familiarize yourselves with this very complete list, which is, I think, alphabetical, that I've been offering here. I think this is a very good resource. Every time you run into words that you're dubious about what the possible definition is. And now that we're talking about semantic mapping, it's very important that we remember that it's not that this word is a problem. No, it's that the word has multiple uses. So just be careful about which one to go for. You will not always hit the target, but we should try to do it like maybe over 50% of the time, right? That's the idea. Concerning proverbs and idioms, that's also another area that I think deserves our attention, because we don't always have, like right on the spot, the expression necessary to express, use this proverbial thinking that, concentrates, creates these metaphors and all these things. It's not always handy. It's not always easy to come by when you're speaking, especially for interpretation. So having a bank of these expressions and going over them regularly is very good. This is very good for the writing and for the speaking. Fulano de tal de John Doe. You see? Hacerse de la vista gorda, to pretend not to see. Okay. I'll briefly go back to history of translation here. And the reason is because this is an important historical figure that has been, I think, the Cubans took over Jose Marti's historical figure, and they used it for their Castro's revolution, leftist revolution in Cuba. It's a socialist revolution. But the reality is that Jose Marti was a translator and he spoke English. Did you know that Jose Marti spoke English? So my question is this: when you listen to the name Jose Marti, what does he stand for? What do you think he stands for? What do you think about someone tells you we're gonna see a movie or documentary, or we're gonna be discussing something on Jose Marti? What do you think they're gonna talk to you about?
Well, first thing that comes to my mind, it's he was a poet, but well, he was also, let's say, a revolutionary at his time, could be because he feels, or he had all of these principles of freedom and liberty in his country then. But he actually moved to United States, where he lived, I think, in much of his life. That's what I can recall.
Good, thank you. For many people, Jose Marti is a communist, and considering that he died a war hero for the during the war that occurred in Cuba, many people think, well, this is a martyr. It's a martyr, the ideal martyr. But the reality is that Jose Marti played an important role in diplomacy. Okay, in diplomacy. Very, very, he's a man who was highly educated, and he spoke very good English. Many people don't think that's important. I think it's a mistake, because all these people who talk about Jose Marti, they don't talk much about that part of his life, right? You see there, he's more of a revolutionary figure tied to ideologically to the left, but he has another aspect. There's another aspect of his persona that it's worth looking at, because we're studying translators and the translator profile. So this is Jose Marti, as you mentioned, his poet, patriot, martyr of the Cuban independence, but also a translator, right? He translated lots of material for the joy or enjoyment of translating, but he was, forced to do it out of economic needs. He made a living out of this. He learned English at an early age, and he had begun to translate at age 13 approximately. So he kept on translating for the rest of his life, including his time as a student in Spain. Okay. His period of greatest productivity was his stay in New York, and then he returned to Cuba, fighting that war against the Spaniards for the independence of Spain, of Cuba, sorry. In New York, he was what we would call today freelancer. He was an in-house translator also. So there is a difference, right, between them. Could you tell me? I don't know. Do you know the difference between being a freelance translator or an in-house translator?
Well, I think that freelancer could be someone who is more than works independently, not like for a company or based on a, but someone who at a certain point who is known for his writings, actually writing articles, and is at some point published.
Okay. Right. And an in-house translator is the opposite, right? Someone who is contracted and who'll take work uh, and he's probably on a payroll. Okay, very good. He translated several books for the publishing of house named Appleton and also for newspapers. And of course, he translated into English several of his articles and pamphlets supporting the political movement he supported. And then I think he also uh, took the label of a revolutionary activist. Now, here I'd like to bring in this presentation that he took money for translation tasks, and many of those tasks did not have any appeal to him really. So he did it just to make a living, okay? And this is something that happens to professional people. Sometimes you just do work because you have to do it, but not because this is what you love. So we have some comments concerning this special situation Jose Marti lived, and we read that he mentions, anoche, well, he communicates to his sister, anoche puse fin a la traducción de un libro de lógica que me ha parecido, a pesar de tener yo por maravillosamente inútiles tantas reglas pueriles. Preciosísimo libro, puesto con el producto de esta traducción puedo traer a mi padre a mi lado. So he's a person who lived on translation work, but not always necessarily did it because he liked it. So he was also a diplomat, and this is, I think, an important aspect of his life. And he lived in exile in New York. He was a consul for several Latin American countries. So this is important because um, he was a well-trained man with very good English, and he, you know, like represented several governments. This is very important. He gained a lot of experience out of this, of course, and also as conducting business in that city. So we read here that also he wrote for newspapers such as La Nación from Argentina, and well, this is a man who was involved in politics very much, and he obtained all of this expertise, a lot of it from the Argentinian sides, right? Side. And his columns were sprinkled with, all kinds of references to the various delegations and their behavior, right? He was involved in writing for Spanish-speaking audiences about the assassination attempt and eventual death of President Garfield in 1881. So this gives us an idea of what the kind of person he was. Considering that there wasn't the media we do have right now, because there has always been these channels of communication. Well, people like Marti were involved in that process of communicating information unknown to general audiences in our part of the world, especially because of the language barrier. He used New York newspapers as sources, and well, he took this information, translated it, and provided his personal touch. So he was a great communicator and a journalist and author. Then we could also say that he didn't, of course, offer anything theoretical on translation. He didn't write much about his approach either, but some of the golden nuggets out of what he explained during his translation projects is that yo creo que traducir es transpensar. Traducir es pensar en español lo que en su idioma los autores pensaron. Traducir es estudiar, analizar, ahondar. Okay? So we know that he paid attention to what he was reading, and he cared about the original version and the author's intentions and ideas. Okay. His awareness of the translator's dilemma of the faithful versus the beautiful is evidence in his belief that la traducción debe ser natural para que parezca como si el libro hubiera sido escrito en la lengua al que lo traduces, que en esto se conocen las buenas traducciones. Ve pues el cuidado con que hay que traducir para que la traducción pueda entenderse y resulte elegante y para que el libro no quede, como tantos libros traducidos, en la misma lengua extraña en que estaba. All right. So this is very insightful to me. I don't know if you feel the same way. As I was reading through this, of course, the idea of a translation is that the book is, conveys messages clearly to newer audiences or to different audiences. But then if the translation is not a good one, then this book is going to be as bad as the one that people cannot read. It's like no translation at all, right? People will not enjoy, won't understand anything out of it either. Okay, so now we see that this major figure, by many known as a revolutionary political diplomat and war martyr in the independence of Cuba from Spain, this man played an important role in communicating information, not only for Cuba, but for several governments in Latin America, because I'm sure back in this day, it was not easy to have someone with very good English and diplomatic experience and the expertise and the background in translation and all of that he encompassed, together in one human being. And of course, he was hired to represent several governments in Latin America. So that is why I think he also gained all of this international projection. And then we also have learned here that he wrote for, not only translated books, but also wrote for several newspapers. So he was an opinion creator, to a large extent, an important figure, not only in Cuba, but in Latin America. That is why he has gained some, importance. Okay. I'd like to know if you have anything to say concerning Jose Marti's life, especially this last, opinion he provides here concerning a translation or no translation, right? Translation that works and, provides information, or one that is very strange, as strange as the original in another language. I don't know if you've ever read poorly translated work. Have you ever read a translated book that you didn't understand? That's what I'm trying to ask here. any opinion concerning the life of Jose Marti and his this information concerning his role as a translator and diplomat? All right, I'm gonna reframe my question. Do you think Jose Marti was a controversial figure?
Well, I would say that he was. Good morning, first of all.
Morning.
I would say that he was because actually he went from one country to another because he was always persecuted whenever he went. He was exiled from Cuba and he went to other countries. I think he went to France. From France, he went to, I think he went to Spain and to other countries. He ended up in Latin America, and then I don't remember the sequence, but I think that first, I don't remember if he first went to the States or to Venezuela, but I think he went first to Venezuela. I don't know. But actually, he was exiled from Venezuela too because of his way of writing and being against dictatorship all the time. He always talked about freedom of speech, freedom of life, and freedom. I mean, that was his main topic all the time. And dictators didn't like that type of people, and they didn't like his writings, actually.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What I would like to highlight about Jose Marti is this, that this is a translator who, brought to Latin America a different kind of thinking. The illustration values of reading, thinking, freeing your mind, becoming empowered, citizenship, all of that is, these are ideas that come from much more advanced societies in which values and ideas are worth more than capital, money or power, especially if it is power through arms and violence and political violence. So since this was a freedom thinker and also a translator and conveyor of these ideas, of course, he would create problems wherever he went, especially because he wanted people to know, he wanted people to learn. As you see here, his ideas are very much connected to translation theory, is that you have to tell the truth. You have to make your translation effective. You have to render a translation that is as good as the original, so as for people to really get the message straight about what it is that they are trying to learn. And translating books, which are, I think, potential troublemakers for dictators. This is another a source of a form of rebellion against oppression, intellectual abuse, and all kinds of things that occur in or have occurred in third world countries developing and formerly known as underdeveloped. Now they claim developing, but the reality is that what is wrong or what is behind with people in Latin America is that we have a very uh, our much of our minds and ideas are just outdated. Many of the ideas that we uphold, they're just anachronic. Okay, and those involve many things: the economy, society, the family, religion. All of that is controversial, right? And this man was a source of a lot of this clash, right? But he understood his mission, and I think that's what made him dangerous, right? Many of them claim he was subversive, and they of course killed him, of course. But the idea is that this man would in his way keep people communicated and brought to Latin America a lot of the ideas that were unknown over here in this part of the world, of course. So much colonialism, so much abuse, right? All of that he fought against. Okay, very good. We need to start talking about Anglicisms in Spanish. Considering that's 9:51, I wanted to ask for a break right now, if that is okay, and we'll come back in 10 minutes and then start on some Anglicisms in Spanish, because this is also connected to the cognates and the polysemy problem that we were talking about concerning semantic mapping and denotation, connotation, and several definitions for words. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be okay. Yes.
It's 9:52, so we're gonna be back at 10:02. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Very good. So, okay, I'll be seeing you in a short while.
See you then.
Professor Cardenas, the room is yours. Remember to register your attendance.
All righty. So, all right, here we go. Now, it's important to talk about Anglicisms in Spanish. Why? Because this is a follow-up topic connected to what we were saying before about semantic mapping and the need to deal with polysemy. And all of these different meanings connected to a word when you provide definitions. Well, all of this translates into a problem that exists. There isn't much we can do about it. This will continue in existence because this is part of language change, which is a big topic in linguistics. Languages evolve just like human beings evolve. So it is impossible for a person to have one dictionary that will tell you, okay, this is all you need to know. You need to know. No, there is no way we can do that. Not even with corpora or using the corpus or any other type of technology of database source that's going to give us information. Things are always changing. Languages are always changing because we're dynamic. Societies are dynamic. And there is no way we can say like, okay, this is the solution. No, there isn't a solution. That's why the trend is for translators to generate glossaries and dictionaries. This is what translators should produce because you're always testing ground. That's what the translators do. Languages affect each other. Now, languages in direct geographic contact can significantly change each other's lexicon, phonology, syntax, and style. Okay. There is usually a dominant and a subordinate language. This is very important. So we can say like it's a common thing to have two languages at the same level of importance or prestige. No, generally there's going to be this imbalance, and this leads to other problems that we cannot deny, like linguistic imperialism or cultural imperialism. This is part of the deal. This is part of the process. Language change and language variation, and the existence of the dialects, the pidgins, the educated varieties of the language, and all of this. This is part of the same dynamics. Okay, so depending on the inherent characteristics of each language and the political and cultural circumstances, we're going to have an imbalance of dominance and subordination. For example, the language spoken in the capital of an imperial power will exercise strong influences on those other languages within the sphere of influence of the empire. Border areas are especially prolific areas of language interaction, and as are linguistic enclaves within a nation. We live that here in Panama. You know that the Canal Zone was an English-speaking enclave inside a Spanish-speaking large majority population. What happened is that Canal Zone didn't have any really, I would call, connection or tie to the rest of the country. And you see that the Americans who didn't learn Spanish or who didn't cherish much Latino culture, the Panamanian culture, they just decided to leave. Now you have these mini enclaves in some places in Chiriquí and some other locations where you have some American communities. But the reality is that they never integrated into society fully. That is why you see that Panama didn't change that much, and they didn't change much either. The Sonians, they were always on their own, right? A separate social and political idea. That was disconnected to the rest of the country. As noted in the lesson on comparative aspects of English and Spanish that we were discussing before, I should recall over here with you that English is more word-oriented, English is more direct, Spanish is more flexible, a little bit more artistic, much more loaded with declensions and conjugations, and that allows more freedom more art into it. The two languages have strengths and weaknesses in certain features. So we see Spanish is better suited for emotional expression, such as poetry and speeches, while English is perhaps more appropriate for science, technology, and business. So this is it's not my claim. This is something out of experience. Okay? We know that English is, very, very strong in some areas. And the reason is this, because the language is very useful for these purposes. So we would expect English to penetrate Spanish in matters of science and technology. By penetrate is the vocabulary, the structures, the phrasing, the languaging is going to be transferred into Spanish, right? Borrowed or integrated, especially when the pioneering research and development work in certain fields take place in English in American factories and laboratories. So part of the dominance of the English language has to do with where most of the information occurs in the first place. Languages can also be in contact through mass media. The widespread dissemination of movies and TV programs through Spanish-speaking world has linguistic impact. Okay, although this is lessened by the dubbing of dialogues into Spanish. Nevertheless, a lot of what we have learned as individuals comes from our contact with the media, not only TV, but other media, other forms of media. Even with dubbing, the cultural aspects made themselves known, and dubbing frequently carries over into the target language certain features of the source language. They have problems dealing with the humor, and you notice that in the past there was this humor with this background laughter, and all this that they try to tell you that there was a joke happening. The reality is that humor is one of the least, facilitated topics, and the reason is, and you can see that for certain audiences, for example, those who watch cable or they watch programming coming straight from the States, they are the ones who are going to enjoy this comedy shows like Saturday Night and Saturday Night Live and others. And the reason is because the jokes, they just don't make any sense to Spanish-speaking populations. And there is no way for them to, explain to you a joke that doesn't make any sense. For example, some of these shows in which you have award granting shows such as red carpets and of different kinds, the Emmys and the Oscars and so forth. A lot of that they try to interpret it, right on the spot, right there. They do their very best to do that, even though they do some consecutive interpreting, mostly simultaneous. And the reason is simple. It's so difficult for a person to explain what is going on because, for example, on stage, whoever is the presenter, they're usually joking and making some comments and references and that kind of thing. Now they have adjusted themselves, and they're not, using so many jokes, so much of humor, because humor is something that alienates audiences. I don't know if you see it that way, like me, but people get lost usually with that because the references are like beyond people's comprehension and understanding. Wherever there is penetration or the incorporation or assimilation of that sort from US media. This is labeled cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism. It's important that you recall this. Okay, here we go. This is what media does. It brings in all of these elements of communication, and all of these become a part of our repertoire. They go into our conscious and subconscious minds, and there's transfer and assimilation, either we like it or not. Okay, because many of the terms, many of the ideas, many of the you know concepts behind these characters, locations, values, they're foreign to us, really. They just don't exist, or if they exist through a different, scheme, but they become a part of our context, and they are not here, really, but they become a part of it. So, um, so is this relevant? Of course, it's very relevant. And the reason is this: we're going to have terms which will become Anglicisms, terms that we have to assimilate. And even though there could be some level of cultural shock, there's going to be also cultural imperialism. And you have to recall what I just told you, that there is this imbalance of a dominant culture and a subordinate one. This causes an imbalance in power. This affects communication through a phenomenon called cultural imperialism. Then, a translator has a special role and responsibility in this matter of languages, okay, and Anglicism being part of the phenomenon, because there are languages in contact and there isn't much we can do about it. Since the translator is a bilingual and bicultural individual, ideally, because it's not always the case, he or she is frequently a conduit for influences, for new influences to cross over from one language to the next. Now, here comes the part of the translator's criteria. So bear with me here. Although all good translators are careful not to allow, this crossover of one language into the other, it is all too easy to let certain source language linguistic features to enter the target language through translation. Many times with the translator not even being aware, okay? So inadvertently, you may use terms, or you may coin expressions, and you may cause this crossover to occur, okay? This is especially true for the more subtle aspects of language, such as style and tone, So new forms of words, the new neologisms, coined expressions, coinage is linked to translation largely because you're trying to communicate ideas, and these ideas need to be conveyed somehow. In the absence of an equivalent, you have to come up with one. And then, probably you're going to be using some domesticated version of a word. So new words and grammatical constructions are more obvious, and the translator is the first to spot them. Okay, and then we run into this expressions that everybody accepts, and they become Anglicism. The human condition of the translator as a conduit of language interference is more serious if the translator lacks ability or confidence in the language he or she is translating into. So there is a weaker situation or susceptibility to cause this crossover of concepts. This is another reason why translators should only go translating into their mother language, right? So if we are, native speakers of Spanish, we should be translating into Spanish, okay? So that we know better uses and have better criteria about how to write or what to say that is better educated of a better, closer to the target, in other words. So when one translates into one's second language, one is never as certain about grammar, style, and even lexicon as when going into the mother tongue, and the situation permits a greater degree of interference. Then we get into the interference problem. Okay, so should we do this as they do in other countries? I think it would be a very good idea to have translators only translate into their mother language, but then we're going to have a shortage of translators into English in our context. So I think that measure was never taken for this very same reason. So it's a challenge. It's a real challenge because we'll be probably understaffed if we had things separated like this, like you would only translate into your mother language. So cultural imperialism leads to linguistic imperialism. Okay. And a definition that I brought from internet is a transfer of a dominant language and aspects of its culture to speakers of other language. It's transfer. That's what happens. There's transference. And translators are usually the very first ones who transfer this cultural knowledge and linguistic knowledge or information. So there is this overlapping. You see, there is an overlapping of the two languages, but that occurs by means of the transference of the cultures. You're trying to communicate content, cultural content, and then this causes all this confusion. And new, I would call probably we could call those imperfect forms or inadequate forms of terminology occurs, and in this regard, Anglicisms belong to this category. Anglicisms in the Spanish language have long been a sensitive issue for those who wish to protect Spanish heritage. So Spanish has been purist, the RAE, Real Academia de la Lengua Española, has always been there to stop this new forms of communication flowing into Spanish for the sake of protecting the Spanish language. If you ask me, I'm not so sure if this has always worked in favor of Spanish language, but at least they have some established norm or organization that deals with these matters, linguistic matters. And now you know why, right? So when the Catholic monarchy was established in Spain and Jewish and Arabs were expelled through these wars, they needed to preserve their culture, the Castilian culture and identity. And then you see that Antonio de Nebrija's Spanish grammar, and then that evolved into an export, the export of culture, in this case to the Americas, present day Americas, by means of both religion and language. That's what they exported essentially. And that's what we inherited from Spain, religion and language. Also cultural content, of course, by means of language and and connection, with these groups, right? When Spain was the dominant political and cultural power in Europe, this was not perceived to be a problem, okay? It was not. But in the past several centuries, the Hispanic world has felt unduly influenced by the Anglo-Saxon one. And an annoying and threatening aspect of this influence has been the penetration of the Spanish language by English, okay? So this is something that did not occur in America. That began in Europe. When the present-day United Kingdom became a superpower, that occurred right after Spain lost its position of influence in Europe. When that occurred, they started penetrating Spanish language with lots of terms borrowed from English culture and language. Spain's Real Academia de la Lengua has strongly resisted Anglicisms and will constantly coin and suggest proper Spanish words, usually with erratic Latin root, to be used, in place of an Anglicism. However, at times this works, but all too often the new Spanish words only used in restricted academic and intellectual circles. At the popular level, the colloquial talk and mass media, the Anglicism is going to dominate. So what will prevail is what people say, not what the academy says. Some examples are, for example, here in Mexican Spanish, the donas, basketball, bistec, snorkelear, not so much in our context because I think that's a little bit foreign to us. But the other three, yes, they do appear a lot in our variety of Spanish in this region of the Americas. And they are all forms anglicized from the original, right? We have the steak, the basketball, and the donuts. It's very hard to come up with some replacement, okay? Uh, for bistec, well, I've seen that looks like it's probably bife, but that's not even used in our region. Baloncesto for basketball, but I don't listen to that very often. It's what we were talking about, RAI. RAI will propose a solution, but that doesn't stick because it's used among the elite, that's the educated and the academic circles. But what will prevail among the people is the Anglicism, and the Anglicism becomes the norm. What is used, more often becomes the norm. Donas. I don't know what possible definition the RAI could provide for a dona, but dona is donuts. That's what people say, and that's what people know. When everybody says dona, everybody has a picture in their head of this semicircle dough with some sprinkled sugary syrup or just sugar on it. That's what people think about. There are quite a few of them. Okay, I dare to borrow a couple of those from internet. You see here, banner, bar, bowling, or bowling, casting, chat, clip, closet, copyright, ebook, email, fashion, gym, hobby, jeans. So just thinking of this very first list, it would be hard to come by with the right term that would explain what a banner is. So how would you translate banner? What would be the proper word to avoid banner, the Anglicism?
Cartel.
Cartel. But then when you say cartel, do you immediately think of an elongated piece of either fabric or paper that is hung at a top
Well,
rather
maybe
than
because, right. Well, maybe because I know the meaning in Spanish of banner. Immediately to me, a, it is for publicity, could be an announcement, and it is usually elongated. I think it's a big one. It's elongated and it's used for to provide information or just to enhance or emphasize. Could be an event, could be the name of a store, many things. That's a cartel for me, but actually it's that
right.
that is the
And
meaning that comes to my mind.
yeah, this is a troublesome word Because to me, if I say cartel, I could probably think of a poster, and a poster is more of a square type of announcement or a piece of information communicated, probably through images and print. But if you printed material, I mean letters and so forth. But thinking of a banner as a top elongated piece of announcement that's either images or maybe printed information on it, that takes different forms. So if I say cartel, that to me it's an incomplete definition to what the banner could, really stand
Right.
for. So it's
Right.
a
I
hard,
understand. Uh-huh.
yeah,
It's a hard
it's a
word.
hard word to define. So
Bruno.
you need
I,
to provide some explanation to
mhm.
it.
Yes, it is. In regards to the poster, I have heard the word affiche, which is
That's
that's
another
why for
one.
me it doesn't have any complication or difficulty in. But it is true that banner, being very, it's an English word. Then the version in Spanish or the equivalent in Spanish must be explained. I agree with you that in that sense.
Yeah, banner also could be a flag, as in bannermen. There'll be abanderados. So if you hold an alliance or some coalition, as we were saying before, you become a bannerman to a higher power, stronger power. That status uh, corresponds to someone who is identified through maybe some kind of a symbol, maybe symbolic flag or something like that. So a banner could also be a flag. That could be the case, or it's like a very generic term. It's complicated, hard to explain. It's hard. It's because it's an anglicism. Uh,
Professor, what about pancarta?
oh, that's a hard one.
Yes. I
That's
think
a
that will depend also on the size.
Of course.
And
Um,
sometimes we are not so clear about a banner size or a pancarta size. Maybe a poster is much more easier to understand the size because we have like it's just a little bigger than a we have like the size much more clear for related to the poster, but to the banner they would have different sizes, so maybe that's why it's not easy to translate because a pancarta it's could be bigger, of course, than a poster,
yeah,
so it
you're
could be
right.
related also to banner or to cartel.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
look,
translate.
for instance, here in wordreference.com, they have pancarta as placard and banner also, carrying a banner. So yeah, there are quite a few. And here you see placard, picket sign, flag, banner. So it gets complicated. Yeah, it's not an easy word, not at all. And here we have quite a few of those. We have, for instance, like startup. They created they began their startup in Caltech. Okay, how will you say startup? And I can tell you another one like fintech. There was a fintech, or they wanted to they began a fintech startup in Ciudad del Saber. How will you
Yeah.
translate such a thing? So this is technical, and this is also foreign completely to Spanish, and that is why it's so difficult to deal with it. Okay, and then alternatives that the RAE may provide. You see here, take a look. Etiquetar, or so to hashtag a hashtag.
Mm-hmm.
Destripe, spoiler. We were talking about this last week, and it doesn't make any sense to me to say the stripe for spoiler. Spoiler. How would you translate spoiler to Spanish?
Hard.
It's a difficult one because you're commenting some information concerning a movie is that the people will watch or will probably watch later. You don't want to let them know the information. How will you say some spoiler? Very hard. Okay, and you take a look, a playlist.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And then the traditional ones which have already been established. It's very difficult to say bitácora and replace it for a blog. Chances are people will know what a blog is, not a bitácora. Bitácora is going to be completely disconnected to what it is. Same as everybody knows, mándame un chat o se comunicó por un chat. Then let's say conversación en internet. What does that mean? Okay. And so forth. You said link to movies, also a teaser trailer. There was a teaser trailer about the upcoming movie. How will you translate teaser trailer?
A trailer would be an avance.
Right.
Un avance.
Mhm. Very good. And but for teaser, what will you come up with?
Teaser.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if we have teaser together with what was the word?
Teaser
Then
trailer.
a teaser trailer. I think that trailer it's referring to the digital format and that it's used, which is a video. For example, YouTube can do the videos, a video show or a slideshow, and then teaser would be the act, the act, the action taken, which is to give some insights beforehand about the movies. That's my interpretation. That's how I interpret it.
Teasing is provocar, un avance provocativo, but that will be misleading because people, how could you say
Well,
that
not
it's the
really.
same?
Not really, because I think it's provoking or motivating people to to wait for what's coming up, and that's precisely what movies are about, or the coming soon. It's all about.
Right. I agree with you, but remember that we should aim for the most natural version, and that's where we are in a challenging situation. That takes us, to a difficult situation because we need to make decisions concerning what is better to write, what is not as good, what to say, and we could be making mistakes,
Professor, but
exactly.
also there are now La Real Academia Española, the dictionary. Also, there are anglicisms that are now like part of the language, the Spanish language. The thing is that we have to keep it up with these latest words that are coming up because here, for example, here in Panama, the people just said, "Ay, no me spoiles esto." So something like they are getting into, also because we have a tendency to use much more English maybe than other countries. But people use a lot of, tienes una startup, así es, mi empresa es un startup. O sea, they already use this one, these words, as we were saying, like now, mutear. O sea, it's muting. But I know, tienes el micrófono muteado. So you say like what? We need to see which are the anglicisms are already part of the El Diccionario Real Academia Española de la Lengua.
That's right, and that's how the vocabulary starts to enlarge. I mean, to adapt, to transfer words that are being adapted into the regular usage. There are some which are, I think, more accurate than others. Mutear, for example, that doesn't, I mean, that is more than an Anglicism. I think that's a mutation actually of the word. Sort of what happens in Puerto Rico. la buceta, for example, to instead of the el bus, la rufa to talk about the roof. They are changed in a different way, and actually, it is not approved by the Real Academia de la Lengua, but culturally, it is known or understood. Now, what I agree with the professor, we have to then look for the equivalent or how use a proper or an adequate equivalent into Spanish for those words. Some of them have, as Professor Katia mentions, they have been already adapted. And then here is where the vocabulary starts from with the borrowing. See, words that then belongs to the regular vocabulary, and then it is enlarged, the vocabulary, by that.
Very, very interesting talk. Take a look at the word selfie, for example. Okay. This is I will call one of the most difficult ones. There is no way you could say retrato personal or something. There is no way you can provide something like that and mean the same. Okay, you get lost in translation with words like selfie, for example.
Also because in Spanish it's so long, like to explain that you have to use like 2, 3 words to explain something that in English is just a very short one.
This is so true.
Yeah.
And as we
Here,
mhm.
Go ahead, Professor. Go ahead.
No, you just go ahead. No problem.
Okay, here, the selfie. I think that that's something that happens with technology. Why? Because before we're used to the cameras that take pictures from us to the lens from the front. I mean, to whatever we want to capture, the image we want to capture. But since technology went on this evolution, and then we have the cameras, but not cameras, actually the cell phones, having this reverse function that you can shot yourself. I mean, that you can take a shot for yourself. Then it came to be the word selfie, and they are just describing the action, and it is now turned into a word. So they are actually reflecting the ability or characteristic or skill of the camera to have a picture of yourself, a device that takes pictures of yourself. But before we didn't have that. That's part of what technology have brought to the language contribution.
Good, very good. Exactly. We have issues with technology. There is always something new, and this creates communication challenges. Okay. Well, there isn't much we can do about Anglicisms. However, the difficulties that Spanish has in resisting Anglicisms can be illustrated with the word feedback. Okay, feedback. This term originated in the field of audio communications engineering, for example, and was defined as the effect of small portion of an amplifier's output finding its way to the input side and thus feeding on itself. The phenomenon is readily observed when microphones placed close to speaker and loud squealing results. Okay. Real Academia proposed the term retroalimentación, awkward term. Okay. And they started preaching about using this term. It gained some acceptance among the technicals, not the academics, but the technical, qualified professionals. But then, in a broader sense, people would not refer to any retroalimentación, and the word, you see, feedback stayed. Okay, And that's what people understood. Okay? And this is the same across different fields. No one's going to say programas, sistemas. We try to use the term that encompasses everything is software. All that procesamiento de datos, that's too long. It's more like processing, data processing, or hardware. Okay. So these are expressions that people understand and people use. The problem with technical and scientific words in Spanish is not as severe in English. Okay. Spanish, then, in most cases, can coin a similar term through Latin or through Greek roots. Okay? So we have a television, televisión, a microphone, micrófono, transistor. Many medical and scientific terms also follow naming procedures using Greek or Latin roots. So what about anglicisms? An anglicism is a word of expression borrowed from English and used in other languages. In Puerto Rico, they're everywhere. So if you watch the Super Bowl halftime show, Super Bowl 60 halftime show, you discovered that a lot of there was different things happening here. One of the things that I would consider, I would say, considering this artist, Bad Bunny, this singer and performer, is that he incorporates in lots of in his lyrics so many borrowed terms from English, so many of them. And I think part of the resistance that he has in some Latin American countries like Mexico and some other parts, where people say that Bad Bunny is not such a good singer, is because he has so much English in it. That's, I think, part of the problem, that they want someone who speaks plain Spanish and only Spanish. However, he has become very successful. In this halftime show performed by Bad Bunny and Ricky Martin and Lady Gaga, what I discovered, what I saw is that for the very first time ever, there was a show fully in Spanish in an English event, English American 100% event, like 100%. Only American people care about the Super Bowl the way they care. You see? So and then they had this show fully in Spanish. Not fully because Lady Gaga sang salsa in English. But what he did, or what NFL did, is that they leveled up English and Spanish for the first time in the United States for an American audience or for an international audience. This is, I think, the good thing about it. The bad thing is that this is all adding up to the preservation of Anglicisms in Spanish, because you didn't notice any Lady Gaga's terminology in Spanish as she was singing in English. She sang her song "To Die with a Smile" fully in English, not a single word in Spanish in it, right? But when you listen to Bad Bunny, he's using all kinds of English terms, domesticated English terminology to refer to different things in his singing. I don't know if you have an opinion about this. Did you watch the Super Bowl halftime show?
Sure, I did. I was waiting for you. I like it. I like the versatility of these artists. But yeah, I agree with many people. I mean, his strength is not his voice. I mean, he's not a good singer, but he is actually very creative in his lyrics and had this talent to produce a culture, let's say a cultural fusion of rhythms, colloquialisms to describe what his land is. I mean, his country and his people and all of that, which make it really lively. I really like his music. There are some lyrics, it's true, that are not that appealing. I don't like, for example, that. These descriptions of things that aren't, I well, I disagree with that. But in regards to the last of his albums, it was actually a hit. All of all of the songs reflected experiences, memories, affection, and that's how I look at what culture is. That's my comment.
I would like to mention what you were saying before about feedback. I think this is a very difficult word because people, in reality, some people don't understand what retroalimentación is. And when you say it's feedback, immediately they understand. And so it's true that the word is upward, it's very long. And I think this is one of the most difficult challenges when we translate Anglicism is because English is very short and they really are very practical in the way they use the words. And also you're talking about tendencies. And in Spanish, on the other hand, it's you really to explain when you translate the words are longer, and you need really to explain every in order to understand, and people don't want to no, they don't want even to listen to that. They are not interested, and this is something that we have also to keep in mind. Immediately we say the English version, the Anglicism, it's just right away that you can also keep up a conversation.
Good. Well, thank you very much for your comments. I don't know if there is anything else to say, but this is very important. So the most blatant examples of Anglicisms in Spanish are observed in street slang among the cities of U.S.-Mexican border, regions in Miami, Puerto Rico, and Hispanic various in large cities in the U.S. This is where a lot of the Anglicisms in Spanish are noticed. Now, this penetration, okay, takes different forms, and that's where we get all this troca, parquear, yonke, la nursa, typear, and all this that has an impact because people lose their status when they speak this way, or this affects them socially and professionally wise. So it's also the existence of these terms that alarm the purists of Spanish language. And the progression of this terminology from street slang to formal written Spanish is long and slow. And this is where translators need to play a role. You need to know that this exists in spoken language. You have to prevent them from going into written language. So writing them is not a good thing to do. This is a disservice to your language if you're going to adopt all of those or aid in the transfer of this terminology. If there are replacements, then the role of the translator should be, especially into their mother language, to provide some sort of a definition, right? Then RAE is behind all the time. Okay? They're always behind, and I don't know what the reason is. I think it's bureaucracy probably, but the reality is coinage. It could be resisted, the coinage of new terms through these means. Now, we have a list of the possible forms in which, this phenomenon occurs, the impact of Anglicisms into Spanish. They come through misuse of prepositions, improper word order, English words of variance accepted too readily into Spanish, incorrect use of K, under the influence of that, excessive use of passive voice, unnatural conciseness, redundancy, wrong word verbs, all part of everyday communication. But we shouldn't let mistakes become a part of our language because it's corruption. We should not aid in the corruption of our language. Not that we have to be purists of Spanish because this is a wrong stance. We have to be flexible enough to understand that there are linguistic processes that will occur regardless of the fact that we like it or not. But the translator's role seems to be the one of preserving long established forms and to preserve the language as incorrupted as possible. So here we go. The translator must be aware that Anglicisms exist, since you may encounter them in Spanish, but we must resist being accounted for their entry into written Spanish. Okay, so do you have any opinion concerning this or any example you can think of?
I have a comment. I would like to know why it says the word resist. It's because we have to be careful. Is the resistance is because we need to be aware? We need to be aware, but do we need just to wait until the word becomes like accepted by the diccionario, la Real Academia Española de la Lengua? That's what is the meaning of the word. Why the resist is there? I asking a question just to clarify my ideas.
As a translator, we know that language will take its own form. You know, we cannot prevent these words from being borrowed or transferred over, crossed over. There is nothing we can do about it. However, we should not, from my viewpoint or the way I see it, or my sources seem to reveal that the professional stance of a translator is to prevent this from occurring in writing. This should not be reinforced by the translator. Translator is there to prevent this corrupted form from being transferred so easily. If there is a proper replacement, that's the one we should use. That should be our first option instead of the anglicized version, because it's linguistically speaking, or from a philology perspective, is corruption.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that, with your point, Professor, because especially when it is the RAE, Real Academia de la Lengua, which is a formal institution and I mean the highest representation or the authority in regards to the language, they will function as such. So there are different types of words that are, but they are trying to pursue that precisely, not to have a corrupted a term or a concept. So it will take a time. I think that philologists will study the words, they will look for the reasoning behind it, the etymology of them. And I think at last, probably option would be the test of time, which is because a word is adopted because of its usage. And then that determines a word to come to exist or to be accepted, to be identified or define any concept. So we have, I think that here to, in a sense of the translator, because of its academicity, to look for correctness and then search, investigate, and consult all the RAE and different types of dictionaries to make then the best decision, to take the best decision. That would be my comment.
Right. Okay, I'm moving on. And then a little bit more on anglicisms in Spanish now. Okay. Okay. So we have to be on guard against carrying over English words, grammar, other language features into Spanish when translating, okay? So agreed. We're there like to filter a lot of that that is gonna happen anyway. But we should not contribute to that, right? Some examples of the most common kinds of anglicisms in Spanish are lexical, for example. Okay. They're obvious to Spanish speakers, but if there is a better word acceptable, we should go for that one. So, frequently, by mistake or inadvertently, without noticing, person may insert this cognates into our language. Some of them are false or partially false cognates. Here we have a couple of examples for our analysis or for our entertainment here. So we have something like he went to funeral service. Anglicism, asistió al servicio funeral. Then the better option should go asistió al servicio fúnebre. Not that servicio funeral is all wrong. It is not, but it is an inadequate. That's what it is. There's a better option. So that takes translation to a bit of a challenging position, right? You have to go for the better option always. There is much atmospheric pollution. Anglicism, hay mucha polución atmosférica. Better, hay mucha contaminación ambiental. Okay? This is better, a little bit more Spanish-like. He said hello to Maria. Anglicism, le dijo hola a María. Better, le saludó a María. Le dijo hola. That would be too literal. The house is located on the corner. La casa está localizada en la esquina. That is understandable. However, it is not the best option. La casa está ubicada en la esquina. Ubicada. It is an industry standard. The Anglicism es un estándar de la industria. Better, es una norma de la industria. This film shows out. Anglicism, su film acaba de salir. Better, su película acaba de estrenar. Here we have. The president was inaugurated yesterday. El presidente se inauguró ayer. Better, el presidente tomó posesión ayer. He played a key role. Anglicism jugó un rol llave. Better, un papel fundamental o clave. Rol clave. It's better to say papel fundamental. He forgot the topic of the lecture. Anglicism using is olvidó el tópico de la lectura. Better, olvidó el tema de la conferencia. They're also of a syntactical nature. So these are Anglicisms resulting from the carrying English grammatical structures over into Spanish. Difficult to spot, of course, but we need to do our analysis and, if possible, find a solution. Look at these. The Johnsons live here. Los Johnsons viven aquí. Johnson viven aquí. That's the better option. Move forward a bit. Okay. Overuse of possessive pronouns with parts of a body. So this is, on board an aircraft. Please fasten your seatbelts. Favor de abrocharse sus cinturones. Los cinturones de seguridad. My arm hurts. Me duele mi brazo. Me duele el brazo. So making decades plural. This is mistakes that we make. The 60s were the period of Camelot. Los 60s eran la época de Camelot. Los 60 eran la época. Okay, here. Or era la época. I think better is era. Just fix it. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, you see? Era la época de Camelot. It's a period of time that refers to a single unit, not several pieces.
Professor, I would disagree in this one because, for example, if I haven't used the word los, which indicates a plural, then I would I would not use era, which refers to a singular. In this case, I think that it would be better to use la década del 60, era la época de Camelot. Probably it's the longest version, and we are not saving words or being very economical on the language or the expression. But I am trying to think on the grammatical correctness. I don't know if you see my point.
Yeah, I see your point. I see your point. And what I need to say here is that it's like a rule for coherent purposes. Los 60, what you're doing is that you're reducing a period of 10 years to a single unit. And that is why they say we shouldn't be referring to several years if you're trying to unify a decade in under a label. Then the corresponding conjugation should be singular. That's what the number for the sake of keeping the coherence of a number. That's what they're referring to. It's syntactical, tricky, and I agree and I see your point. But this is what they claim, and by chance I noticed I also added the end, but that shouldn't be the case. There should be a era, la época. It's one period. It's a period. It's a singular title for the sentence, even though it's los 60.
Yes,
It's
tricky.
hard.
It's
Tricky grammar. Tricky grammar. Tricky grammar. Incorrect use of adverbs. Take a look. Organize it rapidly and efficiently. Then if you say rápidamente, that's not proper grammar. So rápida y eficazmente. They say that's much better. Okay. Not that the first one is not understood, just like before. It's not that the translation would be wrong, but they say it's inadequate. Here's also inadequate. So the frequency of anglicisms may also cause interference. Another form of English penetration in the Spanish is overuse of words and constructions which are acceptable in Spanish, but to a degree that is not normal or begins to sound foreign to the native speaking prime reader. Okay. Each sentence taken by itself is correct and put together into paragraphs and pages, the end result seems odd. Excessive use of passive construction in Spanish is one obvious example. Another would be excessive use of personal pronouns, which are not needed much in Spanish because the verb form indicates person. Yo quiero comer instead. That'll be a better option. So this overuses, this is part of the interference problem. There are also conceptual anglicisms. So Finally, ideas or concepts which are embedded in Anglo-Saxon culture may have perfectly acceptable translations into Spanish which are grammatical and lexically correct, but which are Anglicisms because they undergo a change in meaning when they're inserted. For example, an historical reference to the parties' peace treaty would means to most U.S. citizens the 1783 treaty which ended the U.S. Revolutionary War. But to Spaniard Cuban would probably seem a reference to a treaty which ended the Spanish-American War of 1898. They go both by the same name, Tratado de Paz de París. It means different things for different people, depending on where they come from. Okay, I'd like to know if you have any comment concerning Anglicisms. Okay, we have a couple of exercises along the way. Let me see if we may skip this a bit and get to that. No, unfortunately, let me see. Hold on. No, unfortunately, no. I have a couple of things before we get to that. No, it's not. No, we don't. It's ahead. It's going to be a review. I'll tap again into cognates. Why cognates? Because this is connected to the same phenomenon. Once more, semantic mapping is discovering the different layers of meaning of words. In general, translation does not go word for word, goes idea for idea or concept after concept. And this implies we're dealing with chunks of language. That's why for me it's very important that you do the segmentation of the 2 paragraphs that I posted and you sent that to me. So far I have only received like 7 out of 17 that I assigned. So the 10 remaining ones, as soon as you have them ready, you send that to me. Also, it's a good idea that you do the exercise of creating parallel structures between the 2 versions, because you're going to create another version translated, of course. You're going to compare the 2. That's because we need to go beyond or overcome this trend to define things word for word. We need to overcome that altogether because this is just not productive in translation anymore. Phrases. And then what happens is that we still have to deal with content words. Remember that inside the phrases, you're going to have heavy words loaded with meaning. We have different definitions. We have different meanings. We have polysemy. So what do? We try to deal with them by classifying them. Sometimes the classification or classifying is easy, sometimes it's not. That's why we have different categories. We have the false cognates, partial cognates, and partial false cognates. And we have to be careful with all of them. Right? Look at this, for example. Lujuria. That has nothing to do with luxury. We have to say lujo. However, it's, as you know, lust, lewdness, excess, physical excess, voluptuousness. Mandatario. Okay, it's a false cognate from mandatory. It said we should say obligatorio, but it's more of a governor, political head, primer mandatario George Bush, for example. Maneras, it's a partial false cognate, equals way of doing something. It's nothing to do with good habits or manners. It says we should go for the word modales. Manifestación, it's a false cognate. Manifestation instead expresión. But manifestación is a demonstration of political demonstrations, people marching in the streets. That's manifestación, it's a demonstration, not expresión. Okay, organizaron la manifestación en frente de la OEA. Okay? They organized a demonstration in front of the Organization of American States building. Matrimonio is a partial false cognate. Matrimony as a legal state. Okay, so it's more like married couple. The matrimonio Pérez vive aquí. So it's not a status. We have others like Mediterráneo, without access to a sea, sin acceso al mar. Mediterranean Sea, landlocked, like Paraguay es un país mediterráneo. So they lost access to the sea. So we have miseria, it's a partial false cognate. So poverty, vive en la miseria, no tiene nada. Okay, that's pretty much it. But not like suffering. You have to say instead dolor o sufrimiento. That's better. Modalidad is a partial false cognate. Equals modality in a diplomatic sense. For other meanings, we have to use others like means, approaches, method, etc. And here, it's always good to bring this up. Hacer puente, it's a 3-day weekend. Okay, that's to take the intervening work day off. Make a 4-day weekend, a 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend. Hacerse ilusiones, to dream, build castles in Spain. This is the original version, okay? There could be, of course, others. If there is one you could think of and you want to offer it, that'll be very, very much welcome. Hay moros en la costa. The coast is not clear. There is something going on. Be careful. That's what it means, you know. Hecho a medida is made to order. Incorporarse, to join a group. Ir a medias, to split, to go 50-50. We have a couple more here. Ir al grano, to get to the point. La esperanza es lo último que se pierde. Hope springs eternal. La experiencia es madre de la ciencia. Experience is the best teacher. This one, which I consider kind of sexist though. La mujer y el vidrio siempre están en peligro. Glasses and lasses are brittle wear. I'm not so sure this is in use anymore because of being so sexist. Okay, just a brief reminder here of Jose Marti. Recapping very quickly here on his figure. This was a translator, bilingual, bicultural diplomat, political leader, diplomat in behalf of different governments in Latin America, war hero for the independence of Cuba. Well, a very, I would call controversial person, right? But above all, a great translator. Okay, I decided to bring this up also because I wanted to comment a little bit further into this. Bad Bunny, or Benito, explained in an interview that English is not his first language, but it's okay. It's not America's first language either. Do you agree with this? And this is coming from one of the icons of music and, you know, global singer. Emmy award winner also.
Well, he refers to the fact that America's original settlers, right? I mean, the owners of the land were Native Americans of the different tribes. So he refers to the Cherokees and the Iroquois and all of the rest, the red food, all of the indigenous, the native people who inhabited the land. So he's referring to that. That's my understanding also. So American English was brought to United States when they came when they came in the pilgrimage. That's what I understand.
Any other opinion?
Well, in my opinion, he's not like, it's just his personal opinion, first of all. And then when he says Americas, he's talking, I think, to the United States, but America is not the United States. It's just a way that they call themselves Americans. But I am, and we are Americans too. So it's just he's saying his personal opinion, also not being some well like informed. That is my opinion, Professor.
I need to ask you something. Did you watch on the news the Shield of the Americas initiative? I'm talking about the president gathering where Mulino attended last week. Did you see any of that?
Good, Professor.
Pardon, say again? I'm going to repeat my question.
I said that I did. I did.
You
I
did?
was watching it. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Oh, all right. Now, did you watch during that event Marco Rubio's remarks?
Um, regarding to the canal.
No, concerning the Shield of the Americas. Marco Rubio had a brief intervention, not so brief, but um, he was saying in thanking the presidents in Spanish, and he said that he was a good interpreter and all of that. And then um, Pete Hexet also intervened. Then at a point during that presentation that was held over there in the States, I don't know, I think it was in California, probably, I think during the
It was
meeting,
it
uh-huh,
was in El Doral. No, it was not in El Doral. El
in
Doral.
Florida, yeah, in Florida, El Doral, that's right, exactly, very good. So the thing is, Hexet said, or Trump said, well, after Rubio's intervention in Spanish, they said that, well,
Yes, I
we I
remember that.
speak American,
Yeah,
that
but
they speak
but not
American,
well.
that they
Yeah, I
speak
remember that.
American, and then
Mm-hmm.
Marco Rubio tried to make a joke out of it that he was speaking Cuban. Do you remember that part?
Yes, and then he said something like he speaks Spanish, but are like he doesn't matter. He don't want like speak Spanish because for him it was not like something important like that, something like that.
Well, in the United States, you know what you probably overlooked. I don't know if you checked that out, but that comment when Hexet or Trump said that the that they speak American because they don't speak Spanish, that is a
Yeah,
very racist
yeah,
comment.
That's
And
right. Mhm.
the understatement behind that is that English is not an official language, but English is the language, the only one spoken in that country. They don't consider that right
eh,
now there are over 100 million speakers
okay.
of Spanish in the United States. So they ignore facts. They decided to ignore reality they don't take into account people who speak Spanish. They consider that English is the language and they speak American. That is so wrong.
Mhm.
That's very, very racist. I don't know if you understood that or not.
Yeah, the comment that he says, like, I feel like that too. If it was he it was, I mean, it was like feel like when you feel like discriminated. So yes, because for him he was not important in Spanish at all, but he's taking advantage.
Hmm. So exactly. So and then Marco Rubio said that I speak Cuban as a way to tell them that languages have a political position, or languages give you a political advantage. And since he wants to be the president of Cuba, or whatever it is that his ambitions are, he speaks Cuban, he can rule a country. That's what he's trying to say. But it was trying to make fun of this tense situation that was created, that they speak American. American is not a language. It's a nationality and it's a political position they're having. Like they don't want anybody in their country who doesn't speak English, and that is extremely racist considering that there are Aboriginal languages. There are 100 million Spanish-speaking people living in the States. So this is very serious, and this tells us that the president of the United States is ignorant. It's an ignorant man. This is the reality.
It is true.
Now, after Bad Bunny's remarks, then we
Completely.
have. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
I say that's completely true because I mean, even though that happens, he wants to take advantage of all our countries. I mean, um, it's not just Panama, but you know what's going on about. Um, I mean, he's gonna take control of the whole the whole American continent.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that should be something important. I mean, in that case, if he's thinking about that, I mean, he must not ignore peoples because the language, because that's something that I feel about it when he spoke, when regarded when he was speaking, when he refers to what Marcos Rubio said.
So, I don't know if you're aware of this, but at present, if you speak Spanish, ICE can take you away immediately. It doesn't matter if you have your papers or not. They're taking you away anyway because they assume you're an illegal alien immediately, just for speaking Spanish in public.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's
now,
completely true.
mhm. So
I
this
think
is
that
serious.
yes, it is. It is really. It's a pity because well, United States presidents and governments have. Oh, in my consideration, that's my opinion too. I think that they have almost always historically had a very prominent figures, people with education, and had been really a model for other countries. But this time it is completely awkward how they behave. For example, this Hexet, Mr. Hexet, and the way he such I think that he used it in a very discriminatory and derogatory to the other person, and this implies and tells a lot about them. I mean, about Hexet, Mr. Trump, and the people that surrounds them, which is not only the little education and cultural values they have, but also how politically incorrect they are, because that's something that they should leave, I mean, out, or just for themselves, and think always that they represent the country, and such a big country as a United States. So these have not been actually the best government. That's my opinion, my consideration. And it starts with the fact that they do not recognize other groups when they were all part of a migratory movement. They are not 100%. I mean, they come from Europe, from England, and they all had a start over here. And I think that they should, with this freedom that they so fiercely defend, also accept other people's differences and diversity. And that's what this government had characterized by their discrimination and racism. And that was a very racist comment on Marcos Rubio, which is also very childish because this is saying, I am an American. You are not. You are probably half blood. What is that? It was not that serious as it should be.
Sure, fully agreed. Take a look at this other one. Here we have Bruno Mars. He's originally from Honduras, but this is, I think, second generation Honduran in the States. He has a name in Spanish. Bruno Mars is just a made-up name, artistic. So he's never sung a word of Spanish, but after this performance by Bad Bunny, then he started talking about his fluency in Spanish, but he doesn't speak, ever speak any Spanish in public. I think he probably doesn't know any Spanish. So, there is a contrast here between the ideal singer and the non-ideal one that gets a lot of bad rap, so to say, or negative criticism from American media. Fortunately for the Puerto Rican, he won this Emmy award, the award he obtained, and then on top of that, he also got the opportunity to sing in this important event, right? Halftime show. And he went on a tour outside the States and so forth. So this is some interesting events related to what people are saying in media. And then concerning this performance that they did during the Super Bowl, you should remember that this song, very same song, was sung in English with Bruno Mars, but now she sang it. She sang it in English with a different style. For the first time, probably in this show, you had like two languages at the same level for the first time. It's not a common thing to occur. Generally, Spanish is at a lower status, and this is important and relevant for this certificate program because we started talking about the relationship between languages. There's usually a dominant one and there's usually a subordinate one. In the United States, English is the dominant language. Spanish is the subordinate language. In contrast, in Canada, even though they have a smaller French-speaking population, both languages have the same status. Okay. Canada officially is a bilingual country. You can see that everywhere in their websites and everything they do. They communicate information both in English and French. They do it that way. And they try to preserve that French heritage and that French pool of French speakers. And bilingualism is accepted, widely accepted. So they have gone strides ahead of the United States in this regard. Now you just listen to the President of the United States say openly in public to Latin American presidents, because the only Americans over there in that meeting were Hexet and Rubio and Trump, telling them that I'm not going to learn your damn language. That's one thing, because they said that. Okay? Yo no voy a aprender su idioma malo. That's one thing, just to put it in simple terms, and also to tell people over there such a thing, that they speak American, not like Rubio, who speaks something else that is not American. Okay? Very, very disrespectful, out of place, and racist comment. Okay. Any final thoughts on this issue? I don't know if you watch the show, if there is anything you'd like to comment on it. I think it was very relevant for the sake of our discussion, because of language dominance and language subordination.
Well, a last comment on this. I think that yes, it was probably taking it to the critical side, critical thinking, but probably unnecessary. That's my point of view, because it created so much controversy and conflict. And it was actually a marketing deal, actually. And that's why the Super Bowl, probably the directors of the board of directors were looking at the money that they're going to make. And since, well, the Hispanic, it's had been reaching this market, and they have turned into, well, very visible because of the amount, the quantity, but also because of the economy input they bring into all of these type of shows. So it was a marketing activity, an event that proposed and it was also a way to, I think, to show some rebellion to the government itself, because of the eyes and all of the very difficult times the society in the United States, the common grounds in society are going through because of the policies applied by the President Trump. So I think it was used in both ways, as to show their discomfort, maybe with the good purpose of making money, and also including a part of the society which had turned into a highly visible one, the Hispanics. That's my point of view.
One 100 million speakers of Spanish makes the United States probably the second country where most Spanish speaking people live. Okay, other than probably, I don't know, maybe Spain. I think second to Spain. Okay, so probably it's now number one. This is the country where most Spanish speaking people live at present. So, is this relevant to this conversation? If you ask me, I'd say it's very much, because you cannot be persecuted and prosecuted because of on the grounds of you speaking a foreign language that people don't understand. So I know this society has been in a constant state of war, and now they fear uh, terrorism. I understand that. And since people speak around them and they don't always understand what it is that people are planning or plotting, they assume that someone who speaks Spanish is probably a member of a cartel, or maybe they want to do, they're going to blow up a bomb near them or something. It's like when you listen to people speaking in Arabic language around you, you probably may be concerned over that for security reasons. but you cannot chase people or persecute populations because they speak a language that you don't understand. So this goes against everything that we are talking about in this certificate program, because here what we're trying to stand by, respect human rights, acceptance, equality, fairness, democracy, identity, and this behavior is very disrespectful. What I find very, very fearful for us is that we had a lot of these Latin American presidents accepting those comments and then applauding and enjoying that. That's not a good thing to happen. If you ask me, the presidents that we're electing in Latin America, they don't understand their role. They don't know their place. You can see it because of the behavior they display, and everybody's watching that. Don't think that because this is happening in the States, Asian and Europeans and Africans are not looking at this. Everybody else is watching this, and now they know who we are, and we're pretty weak, politically speaking, and culturally speaking, even weaker because of all these things and so much disrespect. Here locally, I was watching on the news, the only former candidate who reacted to this was Martín Torrijos. Nobody else did. They didn't dare to speak or say a thing. They already took away his visa. And he's the only one. I've heard only two voices here. Jairo Bolota Salazar and Martín Torrijos speak about this, but the rest of the political class, they just don't care. They just don't care. And you know what? I noticed that Frank Abrego signed in the States a document. I saw the document in English and Spanish, the translation in both languages. And in this Shield of the Americas initiative, they commit to provide the United States with men, money, and resources necessary for future campaigns the United States is going to be having probably in the Middle East, because I don't think there is any other scenario, maybe Asia. But we're committed as bannermen to the United States, each and every one of the countries involved in this initiative. So it's a commitment we had. So if you have family in the police, let them know. Probably they know more, but they don't want to say it. There's a lot of things are occurring and under lots of secrecy. There's a lot of secrecy occurring. So, well, language keeps being in the news because this is very serious. If you ask me, I was surprised when I saw all of that transpiring, you know. Okay, now it is time for us to go into the turn of the century, 20th century, 20th century translation. You know, the Victorian translators at the turn of the century in England developed a peculiar tendency to archaize, which is to render the foreign texts into English in such a way as to try and convey a sense of distance, time, and place. They made it something elitist to some extent. The technique was to use mock antique language that sounded very unusual in English to try to carry the reader back to the original setting of the text in the source language. Okay, so yeah, there was a bit of elitism in translation. They wanted to use archaic forms of language to make people, you know, feel like they were being taken back to a time and place in the past. So they were extremely concerned about being pure or preserving the original version of any material, namely literary translations. They were very much influenced through archaisms. The end result was artificial and pedantic, okay? and restrict the product of translation to some people who would consume that content, the ones who would understand that. So from a theoretical perspective, it was the exact opposite of the stated principle that translation must be natural in the target, that it should not read like a translation that is as foreign as the original that was never translated. So the Victorian translator justification for this procedure was to convey a sense of the original, as awkward as this might be in contemporary English. So by being purists, they thwarted completely the purpose of modern translation, which should be to be natural. Okay, so they were very romantic and idealistic, I would say, and probably that's why their product wasn't well accepted, and disregarded in many aspects. Disregarded. However, during this period, because of international relations, diplomatic translation received more attention. So we had this Secretary Hamilton Fish reorganize the U.S. State Department of, and this is, I think, the most knowledgeable antecedent of the organization of a well-structured Department of Foreign Affairs in our hemisphere, in the Americas, because the other models are European, okay, of course, but that is in Europe. It's across the Atlantic. Here in America, this is the oldest antecedent of an office that would deal with these matters. He set up the first translating department, right? And we see here staffed with one permanent translator. By 1910, now 20th century, the department grew and it included several languages, as it seems 13. Most of the communication concerned messaging, treaties, proceedings. Interpreting was not a priority, right? Because as you can read here, interpreting was neglected, and the reason was because French still had the lingua franca role assigned to it. Okay, this is Hamilton Fish, as you see here. The need for translators in the U.S. Department was heightened by the fact that very few of our diplomats spoke any foreign languages except for French, which was still the standard language of diplomacy up to the First World War. U.S. diplomats assigned to Spain and Latin America were generally deficient in their language skills. This is interesting because as it seemed, education was very limited in terms of languages. For a country to have so many people from different places and to speak one language or French, this is very limiting. Multilingualism should have become the norm. But, well, as it seems, in many countries, there is this disregard for minority languages, and these things need to change so that we can enrich our world. So many people are neglected. So many languages are overlooked or looked down on. This is something that we need to do something about, right? We read here from an author several anecdotes concerning an ambassador named Henry Lane Wilson, and how he struggled, not fair, but how he struggled in his assignments because of his limited Spanish. So here we go. This is the story. So shortly after the War of the Pacific between Peru and Chile, Wilson was on board a ship to Santiago, where he was appointed as new ambassador. So the ship made a stop in Peru, at Callao, and the Peruvian government assumed Wilson was the ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Peru. And they gave him a welcoming ceremony. Wilson's Spanish was inadequate to tell them of their mistake, and when the Peruvian authorities finally learned that they had been honoring the U.S. ambassador to Chile, there was a cooling of courtesy because they understood that he was not the person they were expecting. Well, there was a big war, but Wilson illustrated the value of the rule that the little linguistic knowledge is a dangerous thing when he said at a diplomatic reception that his wife could speak español mejor si no tuviera medias. But when he meant really is that si no tuviera miedo. Okay? So all of this is the cause of misunderstandings and I don't know. I think to some point it's disrespect because if you're going to try to become friends with other people, then you should at least attempt to speak the language properly or have someone appointed who would interpret for you. But they disregarded interpretation altogether and they considered that if you spoke French, you were okay everywhere, especially in this part of the world because we're so behind them. So this is part of the situation we're going through. You see that we have a lot of diplomats who disregard or just simply do not care about other cultures, or they don't bring anybody. I am sure they could have brought someone with some Spanish fluency to help him about his business in Latin America, but they didn't want to. Okay. So this takes us now to Hispanicisms in English, another important topic. So for a number of historical, political, and cultural reasons, the problem of Spanish interference into English is much less severe than that of Anglicisms into Spanish. By historical, political, and cultural reasons, first of all, we have to keep in mind that the United States is an older country, older, but it's bigger also, and received much more influx of these migrant populations from Europe. So the impact was, I think, larger, and they had, other conditions that allowed them to become these dominant countries they are right now. They had certain advantages. They had probably unlimited resources. That's, I think, the core of the problem with us, that here most of the riches disappeared, just as they are doing right now. They keep on disappearing. Riches appear and someone is the owner, right? So that's the story of Latin America. Someone becomes the owner and there is no accountability, and we don't have a very serious rule of law because of the way the countries were born on pillaging and disappearing things, history of corruption. Not that they don't have that over there, but they fought it and they keep on fighting it, and we don't. Nevertheless, Hispanicisms in English are very notable in certain areas of the United States. We know this. It also becomes a problem for the person whose first language is and who lives and works in an environment English is the dominant culture and language. An excessive use of Hispanicisms is not welcome in academic circles, essentially. And this leads to lots of discrimination and limitations. and integration. I think now speaking Spanish is dangerous for security reasons, but back then that was a cause for looking down on the people or considering that they belong to a lower class. That was like a marker for a social class of individuals, right? And this was discriminatory, largely discriminatory. And then mixing it with English creates a great deal of confusion, and they just don't know what to do with it. So this is not to imply that Hispanicisms or Anglicisms should be seen as negative. As you know, we're learning and discussing here, entertaining that they can enrich a target culture by means of linguistic resources imported. This is valuable and justified when the transfer is at a lexical level and tied to an object or category that does not exist in the target culture. But if you have replacements, then that shouldn't, that, okay, we may accept people say that, but we don't have to write it. Over the centuries, Spanish has made a lexical contribution to English and still continues to do so. Many of them have been directly from Spanish words. In other cases, Spanish has served as a conduit for words that originated in other languages with special relationship to Spanish. We have words being transferred from Arabic and Indian languages via Spanish, through Spanish into English. There are activities that require transference. One of them is bullfighting, that's now being banned in many countries. Typical dances, special foods are generators of Hispanicisms in English. Some of them come through terms related to history. Have a word like guerrilla or guerrilla, as they say in American English, or other words like quinta columna or fifth column, coming from some military or military term, where there is a spying, of course. Many geographic place names in the States also have Spanish names or indicators. There are places in Alaska with Spanish names labeled from the times of the Spanish conquest. Abreojo, the islands of Abreojo, Alárgate Island, Quitasueño. Hispanicisms are also evident in the language of expatriate English-speaking persons living in a Spanish-speaking nation. Don't think that only in Central America or Panama, this is across Latin America, okay, across Latin America, most notably the larger countries in the South, okay. Over there we have people who have, been living there for several centuries. We have their fifth and fourth generation speakers of English. I'd like to talk about this in more detail when I'm going to get to the translation of poetry. We still have some of that, but I don't want to go beyond that if I'm not going to have the time, because it's very important for me to discuss with you here and see if we may discover why is it that literary translation is so important and difficult at the same time, right? Because it's both things. So, okay, what I'm going to go ahead and do next is it's 11:56. I'm left with 4 minutes. I'd like to remind you that we have the segmentation exercise to do. I've received only 7 of those. If you could continue, finishing the 10 remaining. When you're done with that, I'm going to give you another assignment, but I'm not giving any other assignment until I receive what I've requested. I'm expecting that, right? Between today, maybe tomorrow, Wednesday, if you could catch up and finish up whatever it is that is pending, that'll be wonderful. And then we'll move on, right? Well, at least I think it's 11:56. I'm gonna be stopping here. I don't know if the organizers of our certificate program have some final words for the day. It's 11:57.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Cardenas, for all that you have shared with us. It has been very interesting and amazing. Please, for the participants, remember, as Professor Cardenas just said, to go into classroom and comply with the tasks that we have been assigned in this week. And also, don't leave the room before signing up for your attendance registration. It has been a very wonderful day today. Remember that tomorrow will be on at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 dot, a point. So please join us at that time. Professor Marisol, I don't know if you want to say anything before we leave.
Oh, I just would like to thank Professor Cardenas for sharing all that knowledge. Wow, a lot of new things. History. I mean, we translate and we don't know that there is a history behind. Well, we should know that there is a history behind, but we think that it's not necessary, but it is. Culturally, it is. Well, I just want to say have a nice day. God bless you and see you tomorrow. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Professor Rafael.
You're welcome. See you tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Professor.
Bye. Have a nice afternoon.
You too. Take care.